So last night I did an interview conversation with an Afghan who has been living in the United States for five or so years, and he gives some information about what is happening currently in Afghanistan, kind of how things got the way they are, and some things that most people, particularly Americans, may not know about the situation in Afghanistan. I found it to be very informative, and I think that people can learn a lot from this. If you're interested or have any questions, leave some, and we'll be sure to try to get back to you as best as we can. Thanks.
I'm Saber Jafari. I live in Texas, Dallas. We have been here since late 2016. And I'm originally from Afghanistan. I have been migrant for whole life. Since I was 1 year old, my family, my parents ran away from Afghanistan because of war to the neighbor country Iran, and I grew up there. I went to school over there, and after 2001, I started going after 9/11 in 2002. During summer vacations, when I was at the university, I started going back and forth to Afghanistan to get in touch with and get acquainted with the situation over there. And finally, in 2009, I and my, at that time, girlfriend, Afghanistan to start our new life. I spent a couple of years over there working as a private universities instructor over there in a couple of private universities, and also working for a telecommunication company. And things didn't go well according to what we expected, and I received some threats that we decided to run away and went to Turkey to seek asylum. We spent like 3 years, almost 3 years in Turkey as asylum seekers before finally our case got processed and we were eligible to leave Turkey and got resettled to the United States in late 2016, and since then I'm here. This is a short chronology of my life, and that's it. Any other questions regarding me personally? I can have
a couple of questions for you personally. I want to know what city you're from in Afghanistan, what part of the country you're from.
Originally my parents are from central parts of Afghanistan, which is called Hazaristan, and our province is Bamiyan, where two big Buddha statues were there, and Taliban destroyed them in 1997, I suppose, after they took over those regions. And I'm originally from there, and I'm originally ethnically I am Hazara. This is the second major ethnic group in Afghanistan. But when I went back to Afghanistan for living, I went to capital city Kabul.
I think this brings us into a next good question here. Is a lot of Americans don't know that there's not really a unified Afghan identity, that there's a lot of different ethnic groups in the country.
Exactly.
As you mentioned, you're from Hazaristan, so you're a Hazara, but there's also Tajiks.
Yeah.
There's Pashtuns.
Exactly.
I'm sure you could name some others too.
Sure. Yeah. So let me brief you. There are four major ethnic groups, and many other minor, smaller groups that somehow connect to one of these four major ones. The first one that you hear a lot, and even the country is named after them, is Afghans or Pashtuns. They're the same. And the country is also named after their ethnicity, Afghanistan. and they all have a dream and vision to make a country for Afghans, and that is how they insist on name Afghanistan and on naming everybody Afghan. It's a common mistake, unfortunately. And the other major ethnic groups is Hazara, as I...
Okay,
Do you hear me?
there's doing Hazaras.
Hazaras, Tajiks, as you mentioned, and Uzbeks.
Uzbeks.
Yes, these four
Those
are
the four maybe.
Yeah, four big names, four big players. And population-wise, there is no majority in Afghanistan. Every ethnic group is a minority compared to the whole other groups. And this is admitted by the United Nations as well.
Okay, so are all of these ethnic groups native to Afghanistan, or are some of them migrant groups?
No, if we go back enough, yes, Pashtuns are migrants. Pashtuns are a kind of gypsy ethnic group who, during ancient India and Eastern Company of Britain, they were persuaded to invade further northern regions from North India to advance more and take over those regions and lands. But other three are kind of native. But Pashtuns, if we go back enough, yes, they are migrants, but they could manage to take over and declare the nation state when all the world were going to be restructured by nation states. They made to announce this nation states as their territory, or took the control of the power, political new structure, political power by themselves.
So the Pashtuns, they don't just live in Afghanistan. There's a lot in Pakistan too.
Exactly, yes, that is true, and that is one of the drivers of regional conflicts contributing to current situation in Afghanistan.
And I think this is a good question to ask next is what is it like living in Afghanistan politically? Like in the United States, we're kind of united by this idea of democracy, and a lot of other parts in the world you're united by like your ethnic group or this border that's existed. People have lived there for hundreds of thousands of years, if at most hundreds of years. And, you know, to a lot of Americans, like we're not so bound to those ethnic groups as much as other parts of the world are. So what is it like living politically in Afghanistan?
In Afghanistan, everything at first and most is attributed to the ethnical roots. There is no nation, and there is no notion and idea of one nation. And everybody tries to first identify him or herself by its connection and attribution to its ethnical group. And never in Afghanistan there hasn't been any effort to build a nation. Everything was around ethnical groups, political power, political share in the power, everything.
So when was the Afghanistan hasn't always been a country. It was divided during the colonial period in the 19th century.
Yeah.
When did it form?
Yes, it kind of started. Let me to give exact thing. I need to do it. quick. To give you kind of timeline in history, in like 300 years ago, 3 centuries ago, 17 centuries, it started to differentiate itself from southern India, its western neighbor Iran, and its northern Soviet, at that time, Russian Empire at that time. It started to differentiate itself from these 3 neighboring political regions, but for a long time the borders were not fixed and agreed upon with neighboring powers. So and it was not called also Afghanistan, it was called different names. And also internally it was kind of colonial thing, kind of like federation thing, run by different autonomous regions, run by the ethnic groups in their own regions, but represented to the outside, to foreign countries, by that Ahmad Shah Abdali's administration, first in Kandahar and then moved to Kabul. And but for foreign policy, it was under supervision of UK, at that time Britain. And in 1919, when Shah Amanullah was in power in Kabul, he declared the independence, full independence from UK too. And that is the time that currently in temporary in recent history is declared as Independence Day, because they also, in their foreign policy, in foreign affairs, they took over and declared independence from UK. And it is in this month, in August, late August, and yeah, after 1919. That is the history of the contemporary political order of Afghanistan.
Something else I don't think a lot of people know about Afghanistan is you don't speak Arabic there. That's not the language people speak. They speak Farsi, right?
Yes, Farsi and also Pashto. Farsi, also Pashto, also we have Uzbeki language, but the most common language is Farsi. Of course, our Farsi is different in accent than the Farsi which is spoken in Iran or in Tajikistan, our north neighbor country. The difference between these Farsi in these 3 countries are like differences you have between US English and Australian English and New Zealandian English, and UK English, and such and such. But all of them are Farsi. The other most common language in Afghanistan, the second one is Pashto, which is a kind of not fully language, but kind of dialect, ethnical tribal dialect, which is much weaker in organization, in linguistic structure and thing, but which is very common both among Pashtun or Afghan ethnicity in both countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And the third one is Uzbeki, which is talked by Uzbek ethnic group, which is a branch of Turkish language, another accent of Turkish language, which is also in population-wise less people talk in that language. It's only local kind of thing. However, Farsi is most dominant one. You can see a lot of Pashtuns who, since they were raised and born and raised in cities and didn't live in tribal areas, do not know Pashto, but they know Farsi. Same thing with Uzbeks. But every Farsi-speaking, majorly Farsi-speaking ethnic groups, which are Hazaras and Tajiks, know Farsi definitely. Some might know other, since if they were neighbor to Pashtun people or Uzbek people, they might know some Pashto or Uzbeki too.
So Americans might also know Farsi as being called Persian. Like Iran used to be the Persian Empire.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
If you go back a couple hundred years. So the next thing that I think we should go over is that the Hazara ethnic group has been unfairly targeted by the Afghanistan government, and particularly the Taliban. And I was just wondering if you could kind of introduce how the Taliban has treated the Hazara people over the past couple of decades.
Yeah, sure. A good question and very important question also. Targeting Hazaras is not limited to Taliban. Hazaras, as I mentioned you, if you go back enough, Pashtuns were migrants and invading northern regions from their tribal regions. They were gypsies, not resettled in one place. So whose lands they took over and further advanced? Hazaras lands. And from this point of view, one important aspect of Afghanistan's background is the conflict over lands. For example, areas and regions and names and provinces that currently you hear and think of Pashto or Afghans territories like Kandahar, Helmand, Uruzgan, Zabul, Farah. These were all Hazara lands, which was taken over gradually, decades after decades, year over year, centuries over centuries, from Hazaras, and Hazaras were pushed back to mountain areas in the central Afghanistan, called now Hazaristan, which, according to even current administration after 9/11 administration, was officially declared as geographical prison, because it's high over mountains, minimum 2,000 meters high from sea level, and there is no even land. It's all valleys, deep valleys that do not have enough field to do farming or even find a good water or that kind of thing. And
yeah, so it's like a desert in the middle of Afghanistan.
It's a mountain area, not desert.
Mountain
area. If you look up Afghanistan in the Google map, for example, and you see in Kandahar, from the border of Pakistan in south, land is flat. It's flat and very, normal thing like Texas, well, wherever. But in central parts of Afghanistan, it's all mountain, all mountain, a very high mountain, and as I told you, it's very around 1,500 to 2,000 minimum 2,000 meters above sea level. So that's the kind of geography that Hazaras right now are living. Literally a geographical natural prison. And all those good quality lands were taken over gradually after during centuries from Hazaras. This was kind of the strategy by the Afghan, supported by Afghan tribes, supported by Britain, to build a nation for Afghan gypsies. And so targeting Hazaras is a reality in our history. And also Afghans did not only took lands from Hazaras, but majorly from Hazaras, but also from Uzbeks, for example, from Tajiks, for example, as well. But they were much less affected. And after 2000, so let me first tell you this. In continuing this advancement from Pashtun and Afghan tribes in 1870s, there was a king, Shah Abdurrahman, King Abdurrahman, who came into power, and he further pushed further to this trend, and declared could manage to mobilize Pashtuns and other ethnic groups to fight against Hazaras, and mobilized them and persuaded them both by physical land-taking incentives as well as religious incentives, because Hazaras are mainly, not only, but mainly Shia Muslims, and they are Sunni Muslims, so he could manage to take some kind of declaration from mullahs, from their religion roots, that okay, Hazaras are not Muslims at all, because they follow a different branch, which is Shia, and that is a deviation from Islam, and they are not Muslims even. So let's wipe them out. And in that time, according to official documents, governmental official documents, 63% of Hazaras were massacred. 63% were massacred, and this is according to the successor king and administrations of Abdurrahman, who was his son, Amir Habibullah, who wanted to compile a history on Afghanistan. And this was documented in the history, in the governmental history, confirmed and approved and signed by King Habibullah himself. So that thing happened. That also continued. Different systematic official discriminations were in place until 2001. In 2001, when the 9/11 happened and US intervened and all this happened, Taliban did not stop targeting Hazaras, but they couldn't do more than this. Again, when Taliban started in 1990s, early 1990s, 93, since that time, they again started religious propaganda against Hazaras, and for that reason, we witnessed during 90s, we witnessed a major genocide happened in Mazar-e-Sharif, northern city of Afghanistan, in Mazar-e-Sharif, and they, according to Amnesty international documentations, they killed about 5,000 to 7,000 civilians, Hazara civilians in Mazar-e-Sharif when they took over the city in 1997, just because they were Hazaras in 3 days, within 3 days. But unofficial numbers go up to 20,000 even. And also there were some other brutal massacres and genocide in other cities like Bamyan, Yakaulang, but in less number-wise, less population. That is because there were less people in those regions and cities. Now, you cannot call those cities kind of big villages over the mountains. Mm-hmm. And after 2001, which the new administration, new regime came in presence, also Taliban continued targeting Hazaras, but they were not the only group organization that were targeting Hazaras. So this Hazara killing, Hazara targeting has long roots in history, and unfortunately neglected, ignored, and not kind of noticed in silence, kind of thing.
So one thing that I was told was the Hazaras haven't always been Muslim people, that they were, for a long time, they were Buddhist, that the Taliban, remember at the beginning you said they bombed two very important statues, and I believe one of them was of the Buddha.
Yeah, both of them were Buddhas. Both of them were Buddhas. Yeah, in ancient history, before Islam came in the play, Hazara people were Buddhist, and a special branch of Buddhist as well. But after that, which we do not have a clear idea of, because of different massacres and different destructions, mass destructions, we lost the root and the traces how this conversion from Buddhism to Islam happened. Of course, there were invading forces, Arab forces from western side, from currently Iran, in ancient history, coming and introducing Islam and converting people. And somehow, yes, the Hazara people were changed their faith to Islam. However, the surprising thing, and is still in question and not fully discovered, is that how come they became Shia Muslims? Because all other people over there are Sunni Muslims, but Hazaras are the only ethnic group which are majorly Shias. Yeah, we have some Sunnis, we have some Ismaili, which is another small branch of Muslims. But how come they became Shias, not Sunnis? That is still a question which is not yet fully answered.
So in Iran, are they also Sunni Muslims?
In Iran, yes, there are. The Iranian first became Sunnis, like normal. But in Safawi period, which is yes, honey. Oh, thank you for the food. Thank you, honey. And in Safawi, which is like again 300, 400 years ago, the new regime of Iran, which had Turkish roots, they wanted to differentiate with Ottoman Empire, to mobilize people to. So they brought some religious scholars from currently Lebanon, and started the advertising and promoting Shia branch, and made that country even by force. Even there are some evidences, historical evidences, that there were so massive massacres against those who didn't want to convert. They wanted to differentiate themselves against the Ottoman Empire and build another kind of identity, the religious identity. So Iranians became Shias at that time. Still, it's not clear were Hazaras affected by that development or not. Currently, right now, there is no considerable voice giving credit to this, attributing Hazaras becoming Shia Muslims to what happened in Iran. They say that no, Hazaras were long before that Shias. But yes,
so for the Americans out,
we have Sunnis in Iran also, Kurd people, a lot of Kurd people, a lot of Baluch people are Sunnis.
So for the Americans out here, something important to know about this part of Central Asia is that the Ottoman Empire was one of the longest lasting powers in the region. They controlled what is now like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt,
Palestine, Israel,
East Africa.
Exactly. North Africa, Egypt, and Libya, and Saudi Arabia, and Syria, Lebanon, currently Israel or Palestine, and even to their west side, even up to Austria, currently Austria. All these regions were under Ottoman Empire influence.
Even southern Spain was a big empire for a long time, and it broke up during the First World War, or what we call a Great War.
Yeah, exactly.
So something that Americans have been asking me about, and I think a lot of us want to know, is what do the Hazara people in particular think about America coming to Afghanistan? Is it positive, or do they not like it?
But Hazaras, the Hazaras were the happiest people when United States came to Afghanistan. Were the happiest people, and still are happiest people, are most greeting people to U.S. presence because of all those history that I told you. Hazaras were weak, were threatened, were under threat of massive genocide, and for that reason, America was a blessing for us. Was a kind of a rescue, and salvation to Hazaras, and Hazaras supported United States. And during all these 2 decades, even one single suicide bombing didn't happen by Hazaras. All the Hazara region and villages and cities were safe. Even there was no need for international troops. They are the most peaceful people in Afghanistan. And also another thing, after 2001, there was the central government started promoted and advocated a plan to disarm people and collect all the weapons from everybody. It was their kind of nomination. It was told that we are going to do this. However, the first ethnic group who voluntarily and Faraz, please don't do that. We are recording. The first ethnic that by heart gave up their weapons, which is right now we think of it as a mistake, giving back and delivering their weapons and arms to this program, under this program, which was called DDR. I don't know what abbreviation, what does it stand for, but it was called DDR, and Hazaras gave their weapons and arms at the first days. But others, no. Others kind of wisely did not do and fully followed the program, and majorly Pashtun groups, Pashtun regions, they even obviously disagreed and said, no, this is what it is, we keep our arms. And central government intentionally said, okay, I don't care about you, but you can keep. But Hazaras did that. And Hazaras were, as I told you, were under massive pressure, massive threat, and being wiped out. So when US troops and US government came to country, we were the happiest.
So the US has been in Afghanistan for a very long time, at least for our history, and 20 years in American time, that's a lot.
No, go back, go much more back. America has been in the Afghanistan, directly or indirectly, since
1980s during the Gulf War. 1970s.
Yeah, 1970s, when at that time Soviet troops, Red Army troops came to Afghanistan to support their under influence at that time government. They are called or known as communist governments, but they were not actually. Yeah, they had some left interests, and they were close to Soviet at that time. And when they asked military support from Soviet, and Soviet troops came into Afghanistan, at that time US started intervening in that field due to Cold War competition with Soviet at that time. And since then, America has been present, and after Najib, the last president of that regime, that under Soviet influence regime, was killed and was taken out of power, not killed. And at that time, Mujahideen groups took over the capital city of Kabul in 1990 or 1991. 1991, sorry. In 1991, till that time, America had a very active presence in Afghanistan, however, indirect, not by massive troops, by only some agents.
So did the Soviets support the Pashtun people or the Hazaras, or did they put their own people in power?
Let me tell you this. During all these times, the best political regime, all these contemporary history that I told you, the best and most fair political regime in power was during Khalq and Parcham parties, which were under influence of Soviet, and they were trying to build a nation and disregard all the ethnical attributions in place, and work toward kind of social justice and give opportunity to everybody, not regardless of their ethnicity. And Soviet worked for that. Soviet, for that reason, yeah, the major heads, the president figures that you hear, Najib, Taraki, Hafizullah Amin, or others, were Pashtuns because they were most active in being in contact. However, for example, the second most powerful person during all those times were a Hazara figure, Sultan Ali Kishman, which was prime minister for 13 years. And they were working very well toward improving social justice and society, toward more getting education, building infrastructures, building schools. However, they got victimized by the Cold War between US and Soviet.
Okay. I think if anybody has seen the movie Kite Runner, it takes place in Afghanistan, and it goes over a little bit of these ethnic tensions. And there's a scene in the movie where the Hazara boy and his father come in contact with Russian soldiers, and they're pretty oblivious to this ethnic conflict that's happening in this country.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good movie that it's about a topic that not a lot of people are aware of is happening in this country.
Enough history and enough entertainment and enough kind of thing mixed together, and it's a good movie. And its book is even much more better than the movie. And what you see in that movie, or if you have read that, you read in that novel, which I kind of skipped over, is that during as a result of that 60% genocide of Hazaras in 1870s, within 5 years, almost 100% of Hazaras were affected. 63% were only genocided, were wiped out from earth, but all of them were affected. Two major groups could manage to flee, and part of them went to Iran and became citizens of Iran. And another major group could manage to flee to Pakistan. At that time, it was India still, and they resided in Quetta city, which still you have. And those Hazaras had a very important contribution to independence of Pakistan from India as well. But in Iran, they were kind of, because Hazaras facially are different than other ethnics. If you, for example, walk in Kabul streets or any Afghanistan people community, you cannot tell who is Pashtun or Tajik or Uzbek, but you can definitely pinpoint this is Hazara, because we have this kind of facial thing, kind of similar to Asian people.
Yeah, at university, Mustafa would tell us that people would always think he was Chinese.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
he would tell them, "No, I'm from Afghanistan."
Yeah, exactly. If you know this, so for that reason, this is one of the characteristics that we are phased out. We are different. We can be highlighted and targeted and recognized. For the same thing, Hazaras who flew and took asylum in Iran at that time were not kind of let and fully absorbed by the society. They are called Havari, but they were given citizenship and they have their normal life. However, not very kind of welcomed to participate in the power.
Okay. I think I want to ask a couple more questions and then we can wrap this up here. But some people wanted to ask if, do you think America should have left Afghanistan sooner than it did, or should they continue to stay there?
Yep. Actually, we are talking about for an hour, but we haven't yet entered into these last 2 decades. So whatever we talked so far was a kind of prerequisite to understand what happened in these 2 decades. The thing is that Afghanistan, because of its geography, which is isolated and doesn't have access to sea, to open sea, free sea, and the mountainous areas, and etc., and all these historical tensions, conflict over land, economically cannot stand on their own feet. For that reason, there has been some sort of foreign country aid and support all the time in all its history. First, Britain played that role. Next, Russia Empire and Soviet Union played that role. And when these two were phased out, withdraw, and US at the end of the Cold War did not have any interest anymore, that brutal civil war in 90s happened in Afghanistan. And after 9/11, which was very sad, but we Hazaras and even others in Afghanistan also welcomed the consequence and liked the consequence of US intervention, made US play that role in Afghanistan. And what Biden, for example, 2 days ago said, US mission was never building a nation in Afghanistan, but only hunting down Al-Qaeda figures, Osama bin Laden, is not true. Yes, at first they started by doing hunting the Al-Qaeda figures, but then they thought, okay, we already are here, so let's start and build a nation so we can make a heritage of US in the history. This was done, and this was declared as kind of further escalating US mission in Afghanistan. However, for that reason, for that eco-geographical situation of Afghanistan, Afghanistan has always been dependent on some sort of foreign support, and this, in conjunction, in combination with all historical conflict over lands between different ethnic groups, gradually made Afghanistan in these 2 decades a money laundering machine. A money laundering machine to keep this conflict some sort alive, going on and on and on. First, in order to steal these massive, huge free money, $2 trillion within 20 years. First, steal that money, and also by showing, okay, there is conflict, there is war, there is instability, we need more, it's not enough, blah, blah, blah. Escape from accountability in exchange of receiving that huge funds. Second, gradually, those corrupted government in Afghanistan, which also was led by Pashtuns, by very, very fanatic, tribally and ethnically fanatic people like Karzai and Ashraf Ghani, and also another figure which is very critical to understanding Afghanistan is Khalilzad, which is a US citizen and US government's representative in Afghanistan, and the designer of the US strategy in Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, which is a very high-rank Republican. These three gradually noticed, okay, this free money will cut down, so let's get ready for next phase. The next phase was somehow getting in touch with Taliban, which is also Pashtun, which has also fanatic ethnical and tribal ideologies, to deliver the country, the power, the political power after US withdrawal to Taliban. You know what I mean? So this political power will not get out of reach, out of hands of Pashtuns in Afghanistan. And that is the plan, that is the goal of what happened, what you can see during Ashraf Ghani administration. He is not president. I never called him president in my interviews, in my articles, in my writings and papers, because he is not president. He was not elected by vote. He was not elected even by fake and cheated votes. He was not. He could not manage to make even fake numbers for himself. He's with intervention of Zalmay Khalilzad, which is the US representative, the powerful dad, managed to make silent others and somehow keep himself in the palace, in the administration. So they plotted what was going in since 2014 to somehow get ready for the day that US withdraws and make arrangements to somehow facilitate Taliban taking over the country and the capital, not others. And yeah, America should have withdrawn sooner. It depends. However, more than withdrawing is that asking and building and putting in place a mechanism to ask responsibility for those money, accountability for those free money given to the authorities and to the government in Afghanistan. Demand accountability for that money. That was the most important thing first, not withdrawing or continuing the presence in Afghanistan. Yeah, finally, this could not have happened. We did not, it is not realistic to expect a sugar daddy for whole life of Afghanistan. For that, from that perspective, yes, US was expected, and it's very reasonable to expect US withdraw. And what Biden said, that either now, today withdrawal wouldn't make any difference than 25 years down the road later, that might be true. And to kind of force those in place, those in power in Afghanistan, take their responsibility and feel their responsibility and persuade them to try standing on their own feet. Yes, it was a kind of necessary medicine. You know what I mean? However, when you want to remedy a disease by a medicine, you do not pour the whole bottle at once. That kind of withdrawal which Biden did was like pouring the whole bottle at once and in one shot. So that made that kind of withdrawal combined with all those plots that Ashraf Ghani, Karzai, and Khalilzad and Abdullah plotted and planned to kind of give their place to Taliban, not to other ethnical political activists and figures, led to this mess. You see how Taliban massively and very fast overtook the country? No, they didn't took over the country by themselves. The National Army of Afghanistan were told to retreat, were told to evacuate cities and villages and regions, and some obeyed and listened and retreated and evacuated. Those parts who did not follow Ghani's rule, they were left unsupported. No equipment, no further arm fire thing, no even food were provided to them to make them weak and help Taliban to surround them and wipe them out. And this was happening. Any city, any place, any province that Ghani or his direct first circle of figures traveled to during these past 2 months, were surrendered and collapsed immediately after, because they went to plot this and take out any people who might resist against Taliban. The last thing which we saw was Ashraf Ghani's presence and travel to Mazar-e-Sharif and doing the same thing. In this sense, you might say, okay, you accuse all Pashtun figures doing all these vicious kind of plot. How about others? Other ethnical figures like from Hazaras, for example, Khalili, Muhaqqiq, and Danish, which Danish was second vice president of Ghani during both two periods, both administrations of Ghani, and also, for example, Dostum, General Dostum, which is Uzbek, is majorly representing Uzbeks, and all those kind of Tajik figures like Ata Nur or Amrullah Saleh, which is the first vice president of Ghani in his latest term, or Masoud brothers, Ahmad Zia Masoud, Ahmad Wali Masoud, or Rabbani, Salahuddin Rabbani, who is father of that Burhanuddin Rabbani, Mujahideen president. These are Tajiks. All these figures and ethnical kind of, I can't name them leaders, but kind of, representations, nominal representations of other tribals were kind of deceived and gradually corrupt, and even their connection, their organic connection with their own ethnicity was cut. First, they were kind of bought out and given free money, free personal interests and personal incentives for their own families, and they were kind of, made corrupt. Anytime that their people asked for justice, for some changes, they went to the president and said, okay, either due to the pressure on me, either you do these or those people put their pressure. And what they did, the government figures, Ashraf Ghani or Karzai, said, okay, go and convince your people by blah, 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 blah propaganda. We do some nominal changes, and also we give you this much of sum of money. We appoint your relatives, your sons, to this position, to that ministry, to that embassy as ambassador in that country, these kind of things. These personal incentives for them made them corrupt, and they willingly cut and lost their connection with their ethnical attributions, and also in their organizations, in their party or union, political union, there were no mechanism for people to approve and admit their representation. Okay, we accept, we vote for this person as our head of this party, which is representing us, which we are members. No, there was no such thing at all. For that reason, they lost their connection and they got corrupted, and they I keep telling that they were traders of their ethnicity and people. They were not traders.
So you said that they betray their ethnicity. Would we, in order for Afghanistan to be more stable, would they need to completely have a new style of government? Or would there just need to be more representation of different ethnic groups within the government?
A new system is needed. The fallacy, the big mistake that happened in 2002 summit to build the cornerstone of this new regime after 9/11 was this mistake that people in Afghanistan were not directly involving in choosing their administration, their parliament members, their etc. etc. The new order was built around okay, people are weak, they are not educated enough, literate enough, so let's give their share, a ballpark share in power, to their traditional ethnical heads and figures, so they represent indirectly the people. But there was no procedure and process in place to confirm the representation of those ethnical figures by their ethnical tribal people. The first and most important change, which I actively promote and advocate, is that it's enough is enough. People directly should have voice, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of whatsoever. Second thing, second fallacy and mistake, strategic mistake, was that in parliament election, parliament was supposed to direct people, represent people directly. In parliament, one thing that deliberately and intentionally was put is that, okay, for example, in Kabul city will have 30 representatives in parliament, but every resident of Kabul can only vote for one person, not for 30%.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In that reason, for example, those candidates who wanted to run for parliament and were Hazaras had to fight with each other in their own social attribution in Kabul among Hazara people, for example, and against each other to get the vote. So those people who were before the election time were friends, had shared ideas, had shared agendas and political views and social views, became enemies with each other during election. Because why? Because they were wanted to grab their food from the same pot, so they had to fight each other to get more shares. In this essence, in this way, there was no kind of political coalition, political kind of union to run for a whole package of 30 representatives in whole Kabul, for example. Same thing happened to Tajiks. Tajik candidates in Kabul or in any election unit had to fight with each other. And for example, Tajiks never came to Hazara neighborhoods to ask for vote, because obviously nobody will vote to them because they are from other ethnics. So we want our own from representative. Tajiks had experienced the same thing. So there was no kind of at last, parliament representatives went in the parliament as single individual, not as a part of a package of a idea, of a agenda, of a manifest. You know what I mean? And in that reason, they became weak. And round by round, term by term, that parliament became weaker and weaker. Even, and finally, in the last election, parliamentary election, the government, which was the responsible authority to hold this election, to administer this election, were cherry picking who they want to let to come in the parliament, because they were all candidates were fighting individually and alone and against even their friends. So even there were some numerous frequent reports and evidence that some parliament positions, some parliament chairs were sold for, excuse me to say that, but it's a reality, for sexual propositions, for exchange, in exchange for sex. That is what happened. Why? Because of that single rule of non-transferable single vote in each electoral unit. This was, the parliament was the only place that people were directly exercising their votes, but because of this bad and malicious process, it became obsolete. So yes, new political order needs to come into place by the first and non-negotiable presence of people individually and not as a group represented by anybody. And in this way, we can have a hope toward a brighter future. However, at first place, this Taliban terrorist group should be defeated, should be pushed back, and given a clear communication that no, this is not the way that you can control a political power over a very different, diverse country and society. And another thing, for my final words, I'm sorry if I'm making you all bored. However, we as a people in the United States, we as citizens and taxpayers in the United States, what we need to do, what we need to ask for our own interest, and what we need to, what is best to demand from our administration, our congressional representatives. Two things. First, and most important, is to ask for accountability for those tax money, $2 trillion tax money, half of it provided and donated by US taxpayers, $1 trillion almost. We need to ask for those monies accountability. All those money, most of those money were stolen and hidden in offshore accounts, even in cash. Ashraf Ghani fled with 4 trucks of loaded cash when he fled a week ago, and even the helicopter or the vehicle didn't have enough capacity, so he had to leave one truck, one SUV of those cash, and also millions of dollars. Even I do not get surprised if there are billions of dollars hidden in offshore accounts by him, by his first circle of trusted people. Moheb, Fazli, they are both, Moheb is a US citizen, Fazli is a Sweden citizen, Ashraf Ghani himself is a US citizen, Karzai, which is a US citizen also, and many other high-rank officials. And also Khalilzad, the high-rank Republican person. He also himself is engaged deeply in this money laundering machine, both for personal interest and and also for its fanatic tribal fascist ideology for Afghanistan. These needs to be held accountable, and their transactions should be hunted, should be traced and tracked by U.S. Authorities, and especially U.S. Department of Treasury. And the good thing is that since early 2010s, Congress defined a special mission called the Special General Inspector for Afghanistan, which is abbreviated by SIGAR, S-I-G-A-R, for Afghanistan reconstruction, or means reconstruction. If you search, you can find it. It's under, it's a special inspector under the Congress rule, and was supposed to provide and investigate how U.S. taxpayers' money was spent in Afghanistan. And they compiled and worked on many reports on the fraud and inefficiencies and waste of U.S. tax money payers. And they delivered their reports to Congress, and they are also public too, to the extent that they thought it's okay to public. That is a good starting point to work for the accountability and holding responsible these people. We should not, as US taxpayers, we should not let those corrupt officials and figures to have a luxury retirement with bloody money, with stolen money, with corruption money in our neighborhood, in our cities, while they were supposed to use that money to build a nation, build a democracy. There was no democracy in Afghanistan at all. It was fake. You had fake news, but you have fake news, you had fake democracy, you had fake parliament, you had fake presidential position in Afghanistan, you had fake troops, you had fake schools, you had fake projects, you had fake roads, which they gave these statistics. There was no evidence, and also this almost 30,000 students were fake in latest student number. And it was confirmed. I might be wrong on the numbers, even if I'm telling wrong. Not that what is really in the report was less. No, it was. I'm sure it was more even. If not more, it was not less. These reports are documented, are available, and they should be based a basic starting point for prosecution. And right now, everybody is surprised that how come 350,000 army cannot resist and defeat and push back at most 70,000 insurgent and militias of Taliban. First of all, beside all those history and things that I told you, another thing is that no, there was not 350K soldiers and troops. It was fake. It was watered. It was blown. I hardly believe and admit half of it even. They were all fake numbers, and the money was stolen. We should not let them have their luxury retirement for generations after generations in their families with our tax money, which was donated to the poorest people of Afghanistan, not them. Second thing, today I personally expected this, but today my local resources confirmed that in these rescue operations going on in Kabul airport, Taliban is trying to not to let those endangered to enter the airport, but send their own families to abroad by those planes, rescue planes. And that is another real, very strong threat. Many sympathies to Taliban and Taliban ideology and terrorist ideology are transferred to outside Afghanistan using that operation, and that is also a real threat. Yeah, they are. We are told that they are not coming to U.S. at first place. They go to another stopping point to process their case and application and then confirm. But even though many endangered people are left behind, second, in this process, because it's urgent and they can fakely claim that, okay, I lost my documentations, or I'm that person, blah blah blah, they might end up coming to the US. However, other countries, for example, it is confirmed that many of those flights went directly, for example, to Europe, to Germany, for example. Among them, it's very probable that many affiliates with Taliban and other terrorist groups come and enter EU. And same thing might happen to US as well. And that is another threat that we need to ask immediate action by our administration. Sorry to talk so long and probably.
No, that's great. We have a lot of good information here, and I think people would really appreciate hearing about all this. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to speak to me here, dealing with my very unorganized schedule. But thank you so much, Sadir.
I'm so happy.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so happy, and I really appreciate, and I'm so grateful for your interest, for you taking time and looking for this issue and giving me the opportunity. And I would love to have any comments, any questions, and help to further clarify what I told if it is not clear enough.
All right, absolutely. Well, have a great rest of your night here.
Thank you too, Sir Ivan, and thanks to all the viewers and listeners to this recording. And I hope to work together for a better future for all of us here or there in Afghanistan. And I personally myself appreciate, and I'm very thankful and grateful to the generosity of US citizen and US government toward Afghanistan during all these 2 decades. Both you were generous, both financially, both in soul and blood. Your hearts were open to have many, to welcome many asylums, many refugees, and also send your sons and brothers and fathers and mothers and sisters to fight beside the Afghanistan people. However, that is shame, or a part of the fault and responsibility is upon us, that we didn't work hard enough and we didn't kind of do our job as we needed it to do. And I admit that part too. However, this doesn't depreciate by no means your generosity, your kind hearts, and thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your night here.
Thank you. You too, Ivan.